Good morning. It's Friday and you're watching the All You Need to Know on Bloomberg Quint. I'm Alex Matthew. These are the headlines. It's a steady start to trade in Asia. The markets, however, may end the week with moderate losses. U.S. Commerce Secretary tells Bloomberg Television in an interview that the U.S. and China are miles away from resolving their trade issues. The CBI has filed an FIR against former ICICI Bank MD and CEO Chanda Kochhar, her husband Deepak Kochhar, and also Videocon chief Venugopal Dut over alleged irregularities in loans given to the Videocon group. M&M chief Pawan Goenka tells Bloomberg Quint that they are unsure whether all of the company's products will meet the April 1, 2020 deadline for BS6 norms. And infrastructure and construction major Larsen & Toubro, along with India's largest car maker Maruti, are the two major companies reporting their earnings later today. Let's talk about that US market session. It was a volatile trading session on Wall Street on Thursday. Markets fell from the day's high after Commerce Secretary Wilbur Ross said that the US and China are miles away from a trade resolution. The indices, though, recovered from the day's low. Taylor Riggs of Bloomberg News wraps up all the action on Wall Street in this report.
I'm Taylor Riggs with a look at your U.S. markets on Thursday. We ended what was sort of a volatile day in a mixed session. You had the Dow close lower. It was off by about 22 points or 0.1%. But the S&P and the NASDAQ and some of those tech-heavy stocks did close higher. The S&P was up just slightly, 0.1%, and the NASDAQ much higher by about 47 points or 0.7%. You did have some headlines coming out. There were two bills that were expected to go through the Senate and the House to end the government shutdown. Those did not pass. A lot of that was really priced into the market. Most market participants had not expected any of those bills to pass to reopen the government. So you are extending again the government shutdown into another day. That's some of the pressures that we're hearing that's weighing a little bit on the markets. But there was some positive news, particularly when it comes to earnings, drilling down a little bit more into the micro sector. You had the semiconductor index post gains of 4.56% really all day today. You had some really strong earnings for some of the semiconductor chips out Thursday morning that really carried the stocks or that semiconductor index out higher through the day. One of those was Lam Research. They came out and announced second quarter results that were better than expected and a $5 billion share buyback. That is something definitely that analysts were cheering about. And then Xilinx, they surged as well after the chipmaker reported record revenue on both strength in 5G and some of the increased 5G spend and gaining a little bit of market share from what we think might be Intel. So really starting to post some strong results from the chipmakers, and that's giving the market participants a little bit of less concern. There was a lot of concern about these chipmakers and waning demand from China and oversupplying the market. And so at least for today on Thursday, that was some good news for the chipmakers. I want to end on oil because oil was making some news today as well. Oil did close higher and closed above $53 a barrel. That was its highest going back in almost a week. And it was interesting. There were two separate stories going on. One, of course, is the Venezuela crisis. And the Trump administration has floated around some ideas of new sanctions on Venezuela that would, of course, disrupt supply. A lot of those Gulf Coast refiners would have to look for oil elsewhere in the market. And so there were some supply concerns coming out of Venezuela. And that was what was giving prices on oil a little bit of a boost. And you also had some more news out from OPEC saying that they were going to continue those production cuts. And you have Venezuela, of course, is an OPEC member. And one analyst really coming out and saying that if OPEC really can gain control of the oil market and really start to balance out supply and demand dynamics, you could see Brent hit about $70 a barrel. So at least the oil and commodity markets heading higher today as well. And that's a look at your U.S. markets on Thursday. I'm Taylor Riggs.
All right, well, speaking a little more about US and China, well, they're both apparently keen to strike a deal when it comes to trade, and that's the word coming in from the Secretary of Commerce, Wilbur Ross. Speaking to Bloomberg Television, Ross clarified on his miles away statement, saying that there are certain teething issues like intellectual property that need to be further discussed between the two sides. Listen in.
Let's talk about China first, because as I said, Liu He, the vice premier of China, will be coming to town to visit next week. You've said this is a long journey, and we shouldn't expect this to be wrapped up right away. How long a journey is it? I heard miles and miles, but does that take us into the summer? Does it take us for another year? How long is it?
No, I think what I was trying to articulate is that there are a couple sets of separate issues. The relatively easier ones are the direct trade issues. Will they buy a few more soybeans? Will they buy some more LNG? That just would mean them diversifying their existing sources to supply needs that they have. The harder issues are the ones that deal with structural reforms, particularly intellectual property rights. And that one is also important to the Chinese as they're moving up the intellectual value-added spectrum of manufacturing. They're developing more intellectual property of their own that needs protection. You've seen a huge increase in patent filings by Chinese companies. So that's a big issue. The equal market access is another very big issue. The idea of forced technology transfers is a huge issue. And those structural issues are, for the most part, what the Ambassador Lighthizer 301 investigation was really all about. And that's the important but very complicated part of the trade discussions that we hope to get solution to. We want to make a deal. We believe the Chinese would want to make a deal. Hopefully, those two general impulses can result in a very finite, very detailed, very enforceable set of commitments.
Right, so basically no absolute clarity yet on what's happening with the trade negotiations. Let's take a look at the Asian markets now. Sophie Kamruddin is joining us live from Hong Kong with all the updates. Thanks so much for joining us, Sophie. Well, you just heard Wilbur Ross. How are you looking at markets this morning?
Well, it is TGIF in Asia, with stocks rounding out a week that has cast doubts on the sustainability of the January rally amid those conflicting signals on U.S.-China trade talks. But we are seeing optimism around energy shares, for example, which are rising as WTI holds overnight gains sparked by political concerns in Venezuela. And tech shares are leading the advance, continuing to climb despite the weak sales forecast from Intel, leading gains in Tokyo to help nudge the Nikkei 225 higher after a 3-day decline. And the Kospi is rising for a third straight session. It is an IT-heavy benchmark, and the Hang Seng is up about 0.4%, while the Shanghai Composite is gaining ground, up about 0.25%. And over in Sydney, stocks are rising while the Aussie dollar is under pressure on concerns over increased mortgage rates, which puts some speculation as to what the RBA may do regarding its monetary policy outlook. And the British pound is jumping in the Asia session on reports that Northern Ireland's DUP party has privately agreed to back Theresa May's Brexit deal next week. Back to you.
Thanks so much for that, Sophie. Happy weekend to you. Well, let's turn to India now and talk about the trade setup for the day. Agam Vakil is joining us to tell you all about that and also to tell you what's happening in the futures and options space. Good morning, Agam. What's on the list today at the end of the week?
Well, good morning, Alex. It seems like we're going to end the week with positive world moves as far as the indices go. At least that's what the SGX Nifty is indicating. With respect to the opening, we're likely to see a higher opening as far as the Nifty goes. Well, when it comes to trade yesterday, it was very evenly poised, but it was underneath something where there was some amount of volatility which came through. So while the Nifty did end with greens, the broader markets continue to remain weak with the advanced decline ratio in towards the declines. And that explains the mid cap and the small cap index too, and the way that things are panned out. Of course, Nifty Bank closed in the green, managed to close in the green largely on account of the big moves that we saw in Yes Bank after the earnings. But the PSU Bank also saw some gains coming through. Some weakness in ADRs. Tata Motors and HDFC Bank specifically stand out. And in terms of others, we have Vedanta and Dr. Reddy's marginally in the green. So it's been a mixed picture when it comes to ADRs. Again, FIs, very little participation, and it's the same for DIs, even though they bought stock worth around 390 odd crores on a net basis. Now, in terms of contribution, as I was suggesting, it's Reliance Industries and Yes Bank, along with TCS. These were some of the handful of heavyweights which were actually keeping the indices afloat. Save for that, everything else was actually bearing down on the indices, and had it not been for these 3 or 4 counters, we would actually seen the Nifty close in the red for the 3rd straight day. But let's talk about the futures and options space, and this is where things are turning out to be a little more damper and well, flat moves as far as, and there's no change in open interest. And the Nifty banking of futures are actually seeing unwinding of as much as 9% in OI. And open interest distribution, were a little more writing around the 11,000 call, and of course a lot more writing around the 10,800 put. And if we can have the change in open interest, that's why we're seeing unwinding coming through for both the 10,900 put and the 11,100 call. In the India VIX came off by as much as 3.6% on account of contraction in options premiums, and of course the Nifty put call ratio at around 1.44, little changed, and the Nifty Bank absolutely unchanged at around 1.13. We have Jet Airways, Reliance Capital, and Gen Irrigation, which remain in the F&O ban. And I'm going to keep an eye on KPIT Technologies. Of course, we can't really go with this 40% decline because it's actually a corporate action where it now trades without this engineering business. But Exide, TVS Motor, all under pressure, along with Equitas Holding, which actually advanced in trade. So we'll be watching out for that as well. And Adani Enterprises, UBL, and Interglobe Aviation. Look at Interglobe Aviation here, up 6%, so a lot of short covering coming through on the back of, better than perceived earnings. So again, mixed cues, Alex, but it seems like we're likely to end, or at least begin the day with some positivity.
Thanks so much for that, Agam. Well, let's talk about commodities now, and Yash Upadhyay is joining in with all the updates there. Yash, several updates with regard to oil and the political turmoil in parts of the globe. What do you have for us today?
Morning, Alex. So crude oil prices, they climbed as growing instability in Venezuela outweighed fresh reminders of an American shale boom. Crude oil futures in New York gained more than 1% on Thursday as Venezuelan President Nicolas Maduro defied calls from the U.S. and other countries to cede control of the Latin American nation, overshadowing a U.S. Energy Department report showing the highest increase in crude stockpiles since November, along with record gasoline inventories. Mixed cues coming in from the base metals space. Aluminum and copper both fell close to 1%. Aluminum fell from its highest close in more than a month amid muted seasonal demand from top consumer China and an expected increase in global supplies. Copper prices, they fell close to 0.5% as Barclays forecasted losses. Zinc, nickel and lead all gain in trade, with lead gaining more than 2%, its highest gain since November 2018. Gold, on the other hand, remained largely unchanged, holding around the $1,280 per ounce range amid rising concerns over the outlook of global economic growth as investors continue to remain on the sidelines, awaiting developments on the US-China trade war as well.
Thanks so much for that, Yash. Well, let's now look at what's making headlines across the globe. Stephen Engel of Bloomberg News brings you all the first word headlines.
Jumped on reports in the UK that Theresa May will have the support of Northern Ireland's DUP in the Brexit vote next week. The news comes as big business sounds a fresh warning about the impending divorce. Airbus CEO Tom Enders denounced what he called the madness of Brexit supporters, adding that in the event of a hard split, the plane maker would have to make decisions that could be very harmful for the UK.
If there's a no-deal Brexit, we at Airbus will have to make potentially very harmful decisions for the UK. Please don't listen to the Brexiteers' madness, which asserts that because we have huge plans here, we will not move and we will always be here. They are wrong.
Well, the Trump administration is ordering all non-emergency federal employees out of Venezuela amid a deepening power struggle in Caracas. Washington has recognized Juan Guaido as head of state, saying President Nicolas Maduro rigged the election and has no credibility. The administration is also ignoring Venezuela's expulsion of U.S. workers, saying the embassy remains open. And Malaysian investigators have uncovered details of how fugitive financier Joe Low could have made financial gains from the entity that predated State Fund 1MDB. They're looking into a $1.2 billion bond sale in 2009 involving a state wealth fund, local bankers, and Thai brokerage AMB Holdings. They believe Low and his associate Eric Tan siphoned off $126 million from that deal. And investigators in California have cleared struggling utility PG&E of causing the second most destructive wildfire in state history. Shares soared on the news before trading was briefly halted. The report covers fires in the wine country in 2017 and blames a private electrical system, not PG&E equipment. The company is still facing massive liabilities linked to devastating fires last year. Global news 24 hours a day on air and at TikTok, on Twitter, powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in more than 120 countries. I'm Stephen Engel. This is Bloomberg.
The insolvency process was designed to be completed in 270 days.
Right.
So it's a shame because everyone's losing money. I mean, the creditors are losing 17 crores a day. I mean, India is not such a rich country that we can afford our state banks to lose so much of money.
We are now faced with the promoter family, the Ruya family, wanting to pay more than you have put on the table in the IBC process, pay back all the operational creditors, and that has thrown a spanner in the works. How do you react to that?
Well, I think it's very interesting. I don't think it's thrown a spanner in the works. I think that's far-fetched. If you look at the same family or the same reincarnation based on the Supreme Court, New Metal, their first bid, according to media reports, was about 20,000 crores. So if it wasn't for us, the country would have lost 22,000 crores because our bid is 42, right? And that's why I think it's very important that the IBC process is followed. India is a growing country, it's a developing country. If India is not rule-based, then I think the damage to the country is much greater than just the SR process.
But they're willing to pay back all the operational creditors, many of whom are in favor of the Ruya plan, even if that doesn't matter in the formal process, so to speak. The NCLT in previous cases has said value maximization and being able to pay everybody back is an important element in the way they decide. And so therefore, it's not yet clear whether the NCLT will allow for this unusual set of circumstances to prevail. So what do you make of the fact that you have the winning bid, but you might still not win this asset?
So if India is rule-based, which I hope it is, then there's no chance that we do not win. This whole thing of value maximization and coming in, I mean, this company was there, and you said SR has been in insolvency for 540 days, right? So why did they not come before? They had occasions to bid. There was a round one, there was a round two. Finally, the Supreme Court said, if you want to bid, pay off your other dues. What about all the other dues? We paid it, right? We didn't believe, we didn't agree. But we spent $1 billion, 7,000 crores, took care of Uttam Galva, KSS. And I think that's basically my message. India has to be rule-based. That is why India is respected as a destination for investment. That is the basis where India will grow, because any businessman, whether outside or inside India, you rely on basic process of law, right?
Right.
And that's what we followed. The Supreme Court agreed with us. We put in the winning bid. The COC has agreed with us. So from my point of view, all these tactics are to delay, to frustrate, to prevent the right resolution for this company.
I have been sort of floating this idea of 1st April 2020 being the Y2K period for auto industry. Because everything will change. Just imagine the complete fleet sort of sales, which is 500,000 or let's say 400,000 vehicle a month, changing overnight from BS4 to BS6. And it's a very huge task in terms of supply chain management, in terms of ramping up BS6, ramping down BS4. And now since there is a constraint on not being able to sell beyond 31st March, we have to make sure that all our inventory is sold by 31st March. And it's very difficult to control that. So what will happen on 1st April? Very hard to imagine. In terms of meeting the norms, everybody is putting a brave face that yes, it's a regulation, we'll meet it. But the fact is that as it is, we were really stretched in terms of 31st March for manufacturing last date. What has happened now with the sales date being 31st March, we have been pushed another 2 months or so. Everybody will work hard. I don't think anybody can guarantee that they'll be all ready. What I can say is that for most of our high volume products, we'll probably be ready just in time.
Okay.
But some of the lower volume products may spill into April, May.
And that could be so disruptive from a sales point of view because you won't be able to sell if you don't have the product, right?
So we'll obviously work hard to minimize the,
Sure, I understand
impact.
that,
But you
yeah.
should also keep in mind that there is a very high likelihood of pre-sale happening because of the BS6 prices being as much as a lakh more for diesel vehicles. There are a lot of pre-sales. So as it is, April, May will be a dull month, independent of whether we are ready or not ready.
The Central Bureau of Investigation on January 22nd filed a first information report against ICICI Bank's former MD and CEO Chanda Kochar, her husband Deepak Kochar, and V.N. Dud, the managing director of Videocon Industries, over alleged irregularities in transaction between the lender and private entities. The loan transactions detailed in the FIR took place between June 2009 till October 2011. Chanda Kochar took over as Chief Executive Officer of ICICI Bank on May 1, 2009, and according to the FIR, 6 high-value loans to various Videocon Group companies were given during this period. These loans have turned NPA, resulting in wrongful loss to ICICI Bank and wrongful gain to the borrowers and accused person, according to the CBI FIR. The alleged quid pro quo detailed by the CBI is in the case of a rupees 300 crore loan given on August 26, 2009 to Videocon International Electronics, where Chanda Kochar was one of the members of the sanctioning committee. Now, how this loan actually panned out. On September 7, 2009, the loan was dispersed to Videocon International Electronics. On the very next day, that is the September 8, 2009, V.N. Dud transferred 64 crores to New Power Renewables, which is managed by Deepak Kochar. The loan was transferred to New Power Renewables from Videocon Industries through Supreme Energy, which are Videocon Group companies. According to the CBI, this was the first major capital received by New Power Renewables to acquire its first power plants. Further, the CBI alleges that ICICI Bank has also released the security available in the form of fixed deposit receipts of rupees 50 crores in the accounts of Videocon Group companies, Sky Appliances, Techno Electronics, without any justification. The CBI went on to say that the role of senior officials who were on the bank's credit committee at the time may also be investigated. These officials include Sandeep Bakshi and KV Kamath.
Okay, L&T will report its numbers today. As far as the top line growth is concerned, we are seeing a growth of 15%. Similar case as far as the EBITDA is concerned, but the profit will grow 27% on the back of higher other income. This is expected this time around. Margins are expected to be stable in and around the 11% mark in trade. Order inflow is extremely important. We are seeing orders worth anywhere between 35,000 to 40,000 crores that will come in, and the impact it will be lower than last year was because of a high base last time around, and even a lot of quarter orders got preponed into the second quarter because second half, as the management had said, because of the election year impact, the orders probably will be muted. So that is something that could impact orders. The order book is extremely strong and the execution is also strong, so especially in the infra segment. So basically at the start of the quarter, the order book was strong, and that is why the revenue growth will be there. As far as the infra segment is concerned, that will lead the revenue, especially in the domestic market, which is expected to grow significantly. We need to watch out whether there is any revision to the order inflow guidance as well as revenue guidance, or any kind of change in commentary as far as the order pipeline is concerned. Remember, at the end of the last quarter, revenue guidance was at 12 to 15%, and the order inflow guidance was at 10 to 12%. So that is something we need to watch whether the management makes any changes. But this you'll come to know only in the management commentary post the earnings that come out after market hours today.
In all probabilities, it will be a muted third quarter for Maruti Suzuki, and this is largely to do with the fact that this time we had seen almost a 1% drop in their overall volumes on a year-on-year basis on the back of the muted festive season sales. Now, if you look at the revenues for Maruti Suzuki, the Bloomberg poll indicates median revenue figure of close to 19,600 crores, and that will be a decline seen given the fact that the volumes were weak. Not only that, this time the realizations could look marginally higher, but that would be clearly under pressure given the fact that there have been record discounts recorded for the month of December, for Maruti Suzuki. EBITDA for Maruti Suzuki is seen lower by nearly 14% on a year-on-year basis to a level of a little over 2,600 crores. Profit seen at nearly 1,700 crores. That will be a decline of nearly 6% on a year-on-year basis. Margins is something important that we'll be watching out for. The Bloomberg poll indicates a margin figure of 13.4% versus a level of 15.8% year-on-year. Of course, apart from the higher discount this time, higher raw material costs as well as lower volumes, because of which the operating leverage gets impacted, we could see some pressure on margins. But clearly, the management commentary on the 2019 outlook and also what kind of a channel inventory there is in the marketplace is something important we'll be watching out for apart from the earnings.
Well, a bunch of news that we're tracking this morning. I'm going to start off with few results first. I'm going to start off with the PNB Housing Finance number. Healthy set of numbers on the face of it. NII 36% uptick. Net profit too has shot up by 30%. And in terms of net interest margin, they too have expanded to 3.6% as compared to 3.2% in the corresponding quarter. Quest Corp, well, another good set of number reported by the company. Top line 37 uptick. Operational performance has been healthy at 30% growth, on account of which we're seeing healthy bottom line performance. Separately, the board has also approved restructuring of all the USA and Canadian based operating companies. The profitability is also went up higher because of the deferred tax credit reversal to the tune of around 17 crore in this quarter under review. Biocon, above estimates numbers reported by the company. Revenue is up by 45% for this company. Net profitability is jumped by more than two-folds. EBITDA has shot up by 71% for this counter. That's mainly on account of the sharp growth that we've seen in the biologics segment, which in terms of revenue has registered a growth of more than two-folds. Separately, we're looking at Pfizer, where also the company has reported healthy set of numbers. Top line growth, a 12% uptick there. Profitability is more than 50% growth, mainly on account of also higher other income, which has shot up by more than 2 times for this counter. Emphasis, a good set of numbers reported by the company. Revenue 18% uptick and EBITDA shows a 20% growth out there, which has led to margins somewhere around that stable level of around 16.5 odd %. Suntech Realty, not good set of numbers reported by the company. Top line itself, the disappointment creeps and down by 3.4%, muted top line growth. Net profitability or the bottom line performance is also dismal, mainly on account of the operational show of the company. However, the margins to an extent have remained stable around that 40% kind of level. Well, two company news that we're tracking. Interglobe, which has appointed Ronojoy Datta as the CEO, and Lind India, where the promoter BOC has rejected the rediscovery price of 2025 for delisting. The acquiring entity now will launch an open offer again after the public announcement for the delisting, which is expected to happen for Jan 25th.
All right. Thanks so much for that, Nikki. Well, there are several stocks that obviously will be in focus today, but there are also several stories that are currently available on the website, bloombergquint.com. You should check them out. Here are just a couple of them. Tata Motors has no plans to invest and upgrade the Nano to meet BS6 standards, according to a senior company official. And that means that production and sales of the vehicle could stop latest by April 2020. And Mario Draghi has intensified his warning on the challenges facing the euro area economy, signaling the European Central Bank could be even more cautious about any withdrawal of crisis-era stimulus this year. That's all you need to know going into trade today, but for all the news and updates over the course of the day, do stay tuned. This is Bloomberg Quint.